Most family sitcoms take the teenager gets in trouble, gets punished, and learns something storyline and makes it a redemption arc. Married with Children, though, instead asks, what if we just make everyone turned on by a high school girl?
Principal Wicker's been out to get me ever since I stole her stupid husband.
Yikes.
Married with Children is at its best when it takes a very normal sitcom premise and pushes it just far enough that you start asking, wait, how did we get here? Can't Dance, Don't Ask Me does exactly that. It starts as a pretty standard story about a teenager being punished at school, and then slowly reveals that no one involved actually wants accountability, growth, or learning. Instead, everyone just wants the embarrassment to stop, preferably in the most Bundy way possible. So with that in mind, welcome back to The Rank. I'm John, and today we're ranking the 13th episode of the 3rd season of Married with Children, titled Can't Dance, Don't Ask Me, with a story by Gabrielle Topping, written by Rob Ullin, and directed by Jerry Cohen. So let's see how this one stacks up, starting with the episode overview. So we open the episode with Peggy reading the National Enquirer, with a front page headline that we're seeing that says, "Smoking can be good for you," says North Carolina farmer. But the part she's reading is that Cher is set to wed a 21-year-old alien. To which Peggy says, good for her. And right after this is when Al is going to show up and he's going to say, oh good, I caught you on a break. But what Al wants to talk about is lost socks. He doesn't have any pairs anymore, just singles, and he's convinced it's a nationwide conspiracy of women taking their men's socks. Peggy sarcastically responds by saying, you're right, Al, I've traded your socks and our family cow for these magic beans. But Al's not dissuaded. He knows there's something up with women and taking their men's socks. And while he's on this tirade about socks, Bud's gonna come home and say, Mom, Dad, big news at school today. And Al's gonna reply, what, all the boys are losing their socks while the girls in home ec are giggling fiendishly? Of course, then Bud just turns to his mom and is like, hey Mom, big news at school today. But the big news is that the tap dancing club had a recital in the ghetto and a bunch of gangs ambushed their bus. Why? Because someone spray painted on their bus, we may be nerds, but at least we're not poor. Ha ha. And apparently Kelly was the one who spray painted this message and misspelled ha ha. I mean, that's not great, Kelly. And then Kelly's gonna come home shortly after this, and Al and Peggy are gonna ask her, anything interesting happened today at school? And she's like, not to me. Well, good night. But they don't let her leave. So she starts to try to get out of trouble preemptively. She's like, you guys should unplug your phones, because someone that looks just like her got in a peck of trouble. Of course, eventually she's going to realize that Bud told on her, and Al and Peggy are going to be like, hey, you're in trouble for this. But Kelly's like, hey, you should just take a number. I'm already in trouble with the principal, and Mrs. Wicker's had it out for me ever since she stole her husband. Whoa. And I just want to remind everyone that Kelly is supposed to be 16 in the show, and in real life, Christina Applegate is 17 when filming this. Just throwing that out there. So they find out that the punishment that Mrs. Wicker has given Kelly is that Kelly has to be on the tap team. Peggy is appalled. But Kelly's like, it's either that or get kicked out of school. What would you do, Mom? And Peggy says, I'd quit school. To which Al says, way to go, super mom. But Kelly can't quit school. She needs school. It's like her office. She goes in, gets her messages, closes some deals, and then goes home. It's where she's cool and important. It's where she can get a hot meal. But Al swears he's gonna come to Kelly's rescue. He still thinks it was wrong, but he says it was funny, and I kind of disagree with you on that one, Al. There's two things Bundys don't do. They don't eat vegetables, and they don't tap. So he's going to talk to the principal tomorrow. And then in the next scene, we see Marcy is showing up to show Peggy how to fold socks. And there's a huge pile of socks on their dining room table. And Marcy's like, why does Al have so many socks? Apparently, Al went to a pre-owned sock store and bought a whole bunch. And then Peggy's going to tell Marcy about Al's conspiracy theory about missing socks. And she's going to be like, does Steve ever blame you when his socks go missing? But of course, Steve's socks don't go missing because he pins them together. Kelly's going to come home soon after this, clearly trying to look like a different person. She doesn't want the other kids to know that she's in tap. This leads to the revelation that Marcy and Steve were both in tap, because of course they were. So we get the ubiquitous Marcy and Steve are dweeb jokes, as you'd expect. But when Al comes home, Kelly's going to be like, Daddy, did you talk to the principal? Did you get me out of it? To which Al says, has Daddy ever let you down? It's like, lots of times. Well, then you won't be surprised at what Daddy has to say to you. Well, Al being Al, he said crude things to Mrs. Wicker, got her angry, and ended up with Al not being allowed within 100 yards of the school until Kelly's dance recital. And Kelly's like, I don't have to do a dance recital. And Al's like, well, you do now. So he didn't just not help her, he made it worse. And Marcy's gonna try to help now by talking about how cool tap is. That Sammy Davis Jr. taps, and he's one-hit black cat. Oof. But Kelly explains what the big concern is for her. There's a guy, and if he sees her being a dweeb, she won't have a chance, because all the girls want him. Who's the guy? Bruno, the janitor at school. All the girls want him, apparently. And if he sees her wearing those horseshoes, he's gonna go for some other slut. Wow, this show is crazy. I just cannot believe that this was on in 1989. In the next scene, we get Steve teaching Kelly to tap dance. And I have to say, go David Garrison. He was really tearing it up in this scene. But Peggy's feeling bad for Kelly and thinks maybe it would be okay if she got kicked out of school. But Al is going to remind Peggy if she gets kicked out, then she's going to be home with Peggy all day. And this, of course, changes Peggy's mind and she starts encouraging Kelly to tap. So we go on to the recital. There's a bunch of people in the audience, including Marcy and Steve, which I guess kind of makes sense since Steve taught her the routine. It still felt a little odd. Anyway, the Bundys are in the front row sitting next to Mrs. Wicker. And Peggy's gonna be like, hey, maybe there's still a chance to get Peggy out of this. She tells Al, say something nice to Mrs. Wicker. Well, what nice thing does Al come up with to say to her? You look less ugly tonight, which shockingly didn't work. And then we're gonna get another reference to the socks, where apparently Al has already lost all of his socks, except for a red and green one. The camera's then gonna pan down and show how all the men's feet have mismatched socks on. And then they show all the women looking at each other conspiratorially. This is such a weird side story. But we're gonna meet Bruno next. Kelly is dreading going out for her routine, but she decides if you're gonna lose, you gotta lose big. After all, that's what her dad does. Meanwhile, Al's gonna try one more time with Mrs. Wicker. You're not gonna really make her go through with this, are you? Think back to when you were a little girl, roaming the range with the rest of the buffalo. And then more references to her being old and a buffalo. And of course this doesn't work, and he turns to Peg and he's just like, there's no charming her, Peg. But Kelly is going big. She comes out on stage and invites Bruno out with her. And they end up doing a very sultry, suggestive dance. Like, my goodness. And not just the audience at home is going, my goodness. Everyone in the audience at the school is going, my goodness, as well. We see all the couples start making out. Kelly's basically turning the auditorium into a big orgy. Even Mrs. Wicker starts to come on to Al, which makes him scream. And the dance actually goes on for quite a while. And when it's finally over, Kelly's like, okay, we're done now. And because there's silence, and everyone's off their seats making out like on the ground, she's like, where'd everybody go? And that's when we see them all start to get up. Mrs. Wicker's gonna say that Kelly's her best student. Of course, the fact that Mrs. Wicker is talking at all means she's off of Al now. And Al says to Peg that Mrs. Wicker bit his neck. Now he'll live forever. Oh no! But it's gonna end with Kelly and Bruno bowing and Bud screaming in the background because one of the dweeb tap sisters has a grip on him. But that's the whole episode. Let's find out how it ranked.
Oh, wait.
So the rankings where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. And before I dive into the rankings, I just want to say if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. I think the story is pretty decent. It's another one where they take the typical family sitcom story of the teenager doing something bad and being forced to learn from it and deciding that the teenager won't. That instead of finding contrition, she'll realize that sex fixes everything. I mean, it's a very Married with Children story. I gave it a 3.75. And that brings us to acting. And the acting was strong. David Faustino is still the weak link in my opinion, but he's way better than he was. Christina Applegate is great, as are Ed and Katie. David Garrison and Amanda Bierce weren't in it a ton, but I thought they did well as well. And I enjoyed Mrs. Wicker, so I gave it a 4. So that brings us to dialogue. And I actually think this could have been funnier. It was still funny, as most of these episodes are, but I thought they missed sometimes by just giving the audience staple jokes, like the sibling rivalry stuff. They've shown they can do better. Anyway, I gave it a 3.25. So that brings us to episode coherence. The side story of the socks was super weird. Funny, but definitely weird. It was just such a non sequitur. Maybe they did it just to fill time? I'm not really sure. Either way, I think that's the only thing that I can really think of that maybe wasn't as coherent. The rest of it flowed well and the characters felt right. I gave it a 4.25. So that brings us to character relatability. Honestly, I think they're all pretty relatable in this one. Maybe not the part where everyone's turned on by a high schooler and creating an orgy at a school dance recital, but that's not really meant to be relatable. I do think that the casual references to Kelly banging adult men is a bit concerning though, but I think that being forced to join a club that you don't want to join and being upset about that is relatable, as is the parental concern about the situation. I think Al saying that the graffiti was funny is a little unrelatable. I just can't imagine a parent liking that. Anyway, I gave it a 4. So some fairly decent rankings. It shouldn't take too much of a laugh counter to keep it in the top 3 tiers, and it got me 15 times, which is pretty good. That puts the episode total at a 34.25, which puts it in the tier I'd watch it again. For the series, the average is now at a 33.66, which keeps the series as an I'd watch it again. And if you're ranking along with me, drop your scores in the comments. I'd be curious to see where we're at here. But thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other Married with Children episodes on this channel, or any of my other sitcom ranking or movie ranking episodes. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. Full rankings are on my website at therankpodcast.com, where you can also email me at john@therankpodcast.com. And if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But I will leave you with this. I got confused by the end of the episode. With Kelly's dance with Bruno, I started thinking, am I watching the spinoff? Married 2 Children?
Over the line? You're so far past the line.
Just so you know, Antonio, that was given to me by Zach. So you can blame him.
And you guys thought this was a good idea?